I mean, I'm very passionate about this topic too, and as are a lot of trans women I know. I mean, there's a huge diversity of trans women. You have those that are mostly in the lesbian scene, you have some who are stealth, and there are trans women like myself who participate in a queer scene in which there's a lot of gay men, queer men, but the bi plus men, it's sort of like the what do I want to call it? Like the secret population among us. Like they sort of like blend in um to the gay men, and the gay men are the largest identifiable group in that building, even though we were just saying how numbers wise bisexual people are actually the largest segment of the LGBT community. If you walk into a club that's filled with men and in a queer space, you're just going to assume most of them are gay, and they're assuming each other are gay. And but it's just interesting being, a femme or a woman who likes men, being in those spaces. You're kind of hoping somebody will get over their whatever roadblocks they may be having, because I'm not surrounded by straight men when I go out on the weekends, right? Like, I'm trying to think what I'm actually trying to say here, but there's just not a lot of space for like a diversity of desires to play out in those spaces, and
Wow.
that is particularly frustrating for trans people in general and non-binary people, because we're like, y'all are really out here thinking you only want one thing, and it's usually another man with a dick. So y'all are all having your fun with each other, but there's a whole bunch of other people in the room, including cisgender women too, that are like, really, like no one in this room is attracted to me. That can't be true. But no one is acting on that desire, and there's so many like systemic and cultural reasons that it becomes so monosexual, for lack of a better word.
This is like so great. I'm so glad that you said this. And like, I'm really glad to hear your perspective because um I think much to my chagrin, I spent a lot of time with like cisgender heterosexual women growing up and who were incredibly biphobic. And so a lot of them would want to go to gay spaces or LGBT spaces so that they wouldn't have some man on their back. They wouldn't have some man bothering them. They could just go out on a town for a night of dancing or a night of just with their friends, and they don't have to worry that there's going to be somebody interrupting their fun or interrupting them. And so, like, I'm definitely sitting with that and that reality, like, and it's also like other realities of like, yeah, there are lots of non-binary people, trans women, et cetera, transgender people in general, in these spaces, and there is a variety of desire here, and there's a variety of genders and a variety of bodies. And so I think what we're talking about is also like spaces and like cultural norms and the norms of this space. What is acceptable here? What desires are acceptable here? And what desires might make somebody feel uncomfortable, or what desires might like annoy somebody, or like, you know what I mean?
You
Yeah,
don't see this if you go to a gay bar. Trans women are not included in the sexual economy of a gay bar
that's
or
what
a
you're
gay
saying.
party.
I see.
So that is some of the
Got
work that
you.
I wish I would see being done more within the gay community, is for there to be space for a multiplicity of sexualities and desires, whereas the norm is, oh, honey, we all thought we were bisexual once.
I
You
see.
see what
I
I'm saying?
see.
Like, so
I
there's a
love
long way to
this. I love
go.
this. I love this.
There's a long
I
way to
love
go
this.
for me to be able to walk into that room and feel desirable. And some people might say, well, you're surrounded by gay men. Why would you expect to feel desirable? And it's like, well, because they're not all gay.
They're not all gay, but y'all don't think that. Y'all don't think that. Y'all don't see that.
Y'all don't think that, and it's actually making them uncomfortable to express anything beyond
Or
homosexuality,
to even go to the spaces because the spaces
or
are
to
so
even
biphobic.
go. What
Yeah.
I see most is not that we're not sharing space, like at least in the I'll call it Achillean like spaces in Brooklyn, um, such as this party I mentioned, Carrie Nation. The
Mm,
girls are there. Trans women are at the parties I go to. Trans women are in the building with the gay men. Of course, there are parties where cis gay men are just with cis gay men, but to me, that's a lost cause. That's none of my concern. If they, in this year and day and age, still want to be in a room with only other cis gay men and maybe a few trans men, I have nothing to say to them. I don't know how to get through to them. So in terms of the male queer male oriented spaces that I do frequent, the problem is not that trans women are not in the room, because we are. The problem is that we are othered. We are often put on a pedestal and desexualized, and no one would ever really consider that there would be relationships between the different genders in that room, just at the top of their mind. So what I think presentation.
Yes, yes, you're getting at this is great. This is great. This is great. Yeah. And this is reminding me of what you were talking about the sexual economy, because even if people in the room are like, oh, that's a drag queen, or like, oh, this person is cross-dressing, that person is no longer really seen as like a sexual like
Exactly.
yes, yes,
The
yes,
assumption of
yes.
homosexuality just kind of knocks them off the board.
And so then this is about desire and desirability politics. This is about like masculinity in these Achillean male spaces, whatever, being the way you get seen, the way you
Yeah.
are desirable. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes femmes in those spaces, and that includes femme gay men, feel invisible.
So I've definitely experienced bisexual spaces. They are literally my favorite. Oh my God. But for me, they kind of sometimes happen sort of like rarely, or I feel like, okay, wait, okay. So I have so many things to say. Okay. So there are my friends who are like bi pan fluid. Yes.
Hmm.
And so if I know they're curating a space, or if I know like it's going to be largely their friends, I know that space will be safe to like, I'm good, you know, I'm good. But outside of like hanging with my bisexual friends, when I happen upon bisexual spaces, I am always like, this is amazing, but how did I get here? How do I get back? Like, what?
Right.
How did
It's
this?
like a little blip in time, and you don't
Yeah,
know what made it into being.
yeah. Like, what the fuck? How did I get here? Like, I'm happy to be here. I don't want to leave, but like, wait, how? Why? Why is this like? This is great. Why is this happen? Why is this allowed to happen? And
Who allowed this?
who allowed this?
This is too fun.
This is too much fun. No,
I think first of all, I would define a bisexual space as somewhere where you can't tell what everybody's sexuality is, because it's not assumed, and because and it's clear that there is a variety in the room, so you can no longer easily guess or assume. I think that makes a space bisexual, because as the term bisexual plus implies, this is really a multiplicity of approaches to desires, but it's anything that is not just I want one type of body or presentation or the other. Um, so I would say I've experienced this in a couple different arenas. Half of them would be sex parties or play parties. And then I could further subdivide those into queer play parties, which are specifically, I'm thinking of ones that are started and run by queer women and trans people. Then there are play parties that are more straight bisexual oriented. And this is where you would see the population of like swingers or couples looking for a unicorn. Those are very bisexual for sure. They're a little more like bi curious. They're a little more fun for me because I would say there's more bi plus men in the room, but the norms are very not queer. So that's a type of bisexual space, but as we're saying, it could use some work. And then the other type of bisexual space I've experienced is in nightlife, but in very particular, sometimes difficult to replicate moments of nightlife, like a particular club on a particular night, or a particular rave that only happened one time. Room together, I see it happening slowly but surely. At least in places like this, like New York.
mhm.
And the other thing I just wanted to say, to close the loop a little, we started out talking about the erasure of bisexual people in queer history. I also think this thing we're just describing as bisexual space, I think ironically it did exist more in the past of our community. Like I could say, oh, look at all the progress we're making now for trans people and gay people and bi people to all be in the same room, but it's like, hello, mama, that's the Stonewall Inn in the 60s. There, everyone was going to the same bars because it's all we had, and there's a reason butch queens and femme queens are both queens. Like it's because the distinction wasn't always this rigid, you're a cisgender gay man, I'm a transgender, bi female, or I always use the example of like on the show Pose, Angel, the like Puerto Rican poppy
Yeah.
character,
Mm-hmm.
is dating a trans woman all throughout the show. And as far as I know, they never even ask him about his sexuality. He's just in ballroom. Do they? Did I miss something? Did they ever talk
Um,
about it?
so he very briefly mentioned that he had participated in sex work with men, like, but that's not necessarily like talking about his
Hmm.
sexuality. But I guess that
Hmm.
that might like just signal a certain openness. But I mean, that's work. But anyway, yeah,
Or he's someone that doesn't like labels. Like we
yeah,
actually don't know, but
yeah.
that's something that I really liked about the show, that he was just there and he was walking balls and he had a transgender. I think they got married at the end. I stopped
Mm-hmm.
watching actually, but I don't know, just to acknowledge that this stuff exists in our history, and actually
Mm-hmm.
the whole movement went in a way where along the way we actually lost some of the space for fluidity and solidarity, and now we're having to
Rebuild.
regain it. Yeah,
Yeah,
rebuild.
yeah, yeah, and it reminded me of the Harlem Renaissance, and so many of those people were doing all kinds of fun things with each other. It's so funny. Richard Pryor comes to mind, and it's been a very adolescent um, solution of mine to like not have certain conversations among queer men because I don't want so much transphobia. And so I'm like, okay, let's just like, please leave people alone. If it makes you uncomfortable, please leave them alone. Okay, trans people are people first. They're human beings. Please treat everybody with respect, please. And so I've been just kind of very like, okay, let's just lay some foundational rules, please. Try to treat everybody with respect. Everybody's a human being, please, I beg. Okay, we could agree on that at least, right? Okay, good. And so I think I've just very like sort of adolescently just kind of wanted to kind of like, okay, let's try to leave it there.
Like
Please,
everybody just
guys.
get along kind of thing.
Yeah. And like, please just leave them alone versus like having real conversations that are really uncomfortable and there's going to be lots of transphobia.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
like space to work for people to work through their
To work
shit
through
where
that.
they
Yes.
might say the wrong thing somewhere along the
Yes.
way on the end.
Yes. And maybe for a number of years continue to say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
And so go ahead.
well, just wading into those messy waters as opposed to like
Yeah.
sitting on the shore.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely yes. That's
And
definitely
so I think that the work you have done to come to these realizations and then to package them and share them with other people, I really honor it and see it and think it is so important.
thank you
So
so much.
it's
I
always
really
the
appreciate
people
that.
that care the most and are trying the hardest that are also the most sensitive to messing up. Meanwhile, the people
Yeah.
that are actually committing the injustice don't really
They don't give a
care.
fuck. They don't give
Yeah,
a fuck. They don't even remember that they did. They don't
they don't
care.
even know that there was an injustice.
Anyway. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. I think and what I was kind of saying was that having the dialogue, like actually verbally having the dialogue in a room of Achillean like men, that's kind of like I kind of I
That's
like
where you
ooh,
shy
I'm like
away.
ooh, I'm like Okay, everybody's a person. Please treat everybody like a person. We can agree
Or
on
maybe,
that,
or
right?
maybe it's not your work. Like maybe you're rightfully so burnt out, or that's just not what
Mm,
you're made to do. But maybe your work is
mm.
to like give this book to someone else and
Who
be like,
can
hey, can you help
facilitate?
me talk about this? Because I
Uh-huh.
can't always be the one to talk about this.
Yeah, and facilitate and
Passing
know
the
that
mic.
like pass the mic, yes, and like and know that like yeah, it is important to have the messy conversations and like really hard taxing conversations, lots brought up, and like I don't think I could facilitate that, and like and know that like that this was not fruitless just because at the end of this 30-minute conversation or 2 hour long conversation, people are still going to use transphobic slurs or whatever, or like have really transphobic ideas, like still be able to see that as like, oh no, this is going to be a long process of like having
Yeah,
many conversations. Like I don't know that that I can do that. You know what I mean? So maybe it is
totally.
a passing the mic
Yeah,
thing.
like I mean, I think you have found your work in writing, and I think that it could be other people's work to advance the conversation in other ways. Like it takes all kinds of skill sets.